Find your path with the knowledge of others and become an illuminator for those who struggle. Guide their way just by being true, and being in alignment, because it comes naturally to you. On self-discovery wisdom, we share to find inspiration with lessons for millions. We hope you listen.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Sara's View of Life right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. I'm your host, Sara Troy, and here is my 5th decade. I have been doing weekly decade by decade of my 71 years, my 7 decades, and this is my 5th one. It's the 40s to 50s and everything that kind of went on. Now, of course, more of the detail, not necessarily done in age bracket, is in my book, Sara's Self-Discovery to Soul Living. It jumps around more, but it's it talks a lot to kind of my life as a perspective that I've seen around it. So in my 40s was a very tumultuous decade, but also a very liberating one. I turned 40. We had a restaurant at that time, and we couldn't sustain it. I had 3 children at home. I was only meant to work lunches, and ended up having to work evenings. And our partners, it was just ending up to be far too much of a headache. And so we got out of there and back to being mum at home, which was fine. My 3 kids needed me. I was always the mum that when the kids came home from school, that there was tea, biscuits, cookies, something where they could bring their friends home. Who's staying for supper? By this time, my kids are in their teens. And if anybody's had any teens in their life, you know that that's a very much of a roller coaster. So I had 3 of them. My one daughter was 12, the other was 16, and one would be turning, wait a minute, 40, 30, yes, 18. So yes, it was kind of an interesting time. It was also a time where I was feeling very, very kind of repressed at home. My ex-husband, he and I were going through an awful lot of problems. He was out a lot, coming home very late at night. He didn't want to be in the marriage anymore. And there was a lot of what you call browbeating. He never physically hit me, but if you've ever seen Harry Potter and the Death Eaters, he would suck the life out of me and leave me depleted by the next day. And that kind of went on for quite some time. And it would be always kind of scared. My mum used to say that she was always, watch how my father drove up the driveway and she would know which personality was coming home. And I so understood that because I had to see who was coming home and how it was going to be. And so it was a very up and down type of relationship. On the surface, we looked like this, one happy family, one happy couple. Nobody believed that there were problems. I was there helping others. I was reading for others, counseling others, but I was switched off in my own life. I retreated in order to protect myself. My soul retreated in, my spirit retreated in, and people had the facade of Sara. Very genuine facade. I was there, very genuine. And they didn't want to know what was going on in my life. A couple of people witnessed it because he didn't like them. So it didn't matter to him if he showed that side of him. Other people that he liked, it was always a facade. So if I did say anything, they just wouldn't believe it. Also, I was also the person that was there for everybody else when they needed help. So quite honestly, to be there for me was a kind of like, the healer needs help. Who's going to be there for me? And so I learned to keep it in and retreat. One of my chapters in my book is, only the lonely. It was it was very much kind of the time period where I started feeling very, very lonely and really checking my own self-worth, which I've always had a challenge with throughout my life, is that um, do I matter? Am I valued? Um, does anybody care? You know, all of those type of things. And feeling disconnected from the world, feeling not seen, not heard. And quite honestly, that's gone on until quite recently in my life. It's like even my own children, they see mama, they see nana, they see, they know that I do this, but this part of who I am is not one that they necessarily register with. So it led to a kind of a lonely life that I didn't have anyone to share this side of me with. And I started at 46, we got a computer. And literally, you do remember the dial-up? You know, and if somebody picked up the phone on the other line, your internet went dead. And back in those dark ages, folks, and we have this computer, but that's when I came alive. I started writing articles for my brother's magazine, hackwriters.com, and I realized I had a voice. And he was correcting it, you know, as a literary master, he was correcting it. And I say, no, you're losing my voice. Correct my spelling and my grammar. Because yes, I'm ADD and dyslexic. So yes, correct that. But don't lose the what I have to say and the way I have to say it. And he just didn't understand why people responded to what I had to say, because obviously he's more disciplined. And but people were responding. Um, you know, I did an article on famous people and how we kind of revere them and put them on a pedestal and just like flutter for them. And we look at our own husbands and just like, why can't you be like them? And we forget that one time we were that flutter for them. It's just, it's been allowed to erode along the way. And that, you know, this is escapism in this fantasy that we have with these people that we put on a pedestal and that we fancy. Because we're not getting it at home, and we need to start doing what we need to do, counseling, talk, whatever it is, to reconnect. And if not reconnect, disconnect altogether. And somebody read that article and said that I saved her marriage, and that she realized that she had been um, Mark Wahlberg, I think, was her dream, and that she had been putting all her passion on this illusion and neglecting her husband. And they had sat down and had a talk, and that you know, they were putting their marriage back together, which is wonderful to know. There's something you've just written had that impact. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's lovely to know that somebody actually reached out to tell you. So I would continue writing articles because it was my voice and I had a voice to share. And it was my creative force. I would go back to England to see mom and my sister, um, generally every year. You know, we did trips, you know, to Disneyland on my daughter's 10th birthday. And, you know, we did these family things. We'd go out for dinner, go out for dim sum. But come the evenings, most evenings I was on my own. So TV became my friend, and it still is today. It's my escapism. At the end of the day, I need to go and watch something either that stimulates me or calms me because it's just whatever, and I don't have to invest too much intellect into it. And and just let it, you know, kind of take me somewhere else. And at 40, there was a lot of that time, you know, on watching that. I was very proactive in my children's school as a volunteer, and some mornings would be that, and and then always running around. You know, there's groceries, there's this, there's that, there's cleaning house. Nobody ever appreciated a clean house. They just came home and made it messy again, and there you are. It's the most thankless job in the world, is to clean and do laundry because nobody ever appreciates it. And it was just a hard time to go through. Um, but it was that time that I was feeling lonely and I was striving to kind of feel attached. You know, here in my Only the Lonely, just a little insert from this particular chapter, 23 in the book. Loneliness can be a heavy load to carry, a burden that affects many of us in different ways. Sometimes it can creep up on us in a crowd, making us feel more isolated than ever. Other times it might show up as a sense of being left out of society's activities or feeling detached from others. Despite being surrounded by people, a person can feel lonely, unwanted, and forgotten. Being generally heard and understood by friends isn't always easy. Many times we find people are more focused on being popular or trying to fit into the crowd. Standing out can feel risky, making it hard to show our true selves, especially when it comes against the grain. The saddest kind of loneliness can be within marriages or close relationships. It's cold and disheartening experience to feel alone while sharing a life with someone. I've been there, and it can make you feel lonelier than ever. There are all there are ways to find companionship and societal interaction, but some people find a sense of community at work or by volunteering. Others might find a place to belong in churches or neighborhood gatherings. But it's important to remember that these connections might bring only temporary comfort or be at a surface level, not really easing the sign of loneliness. There are no two paths to a happier life of the same. It's a personal journey. Maybe you'll discover new passions or build relationships that truly reflect who you are. You might set personal goals or seek to help a professional. Those crucial is taking steps towards a life that aligns with your values and brings you happiness and fulfillment. Well, that's where I was at. I was at that stage of looking at building that fulfillment, trying to find out who is Sara now. I was an introvert who was extroverted. And I've always been one of those people that I'm never one thing or the other. I'm on that borderline. And here is an article that I wrote that's in the book. Over the last 23 years, I've undergone a remarkable transformation from a person plagued by insecurity and self-doubt. In my youth, I was a spirited individual, guided by instinct and strong sense of freedom. However, life's trials and tribulations gradually eroded that innocent perspective, leaving me immersed in darkness for a time. Strangely, I found some comfort in this darkness, as it shielded me from the pain and numbed me to both the good and the bad. It offered an emotionless refuge, requiring no effort to change circumstances. Deep down, I knew that this was an illusion, a lie that we tell ourselves. There is no escape from life's hardships, no hiding from the pain, and no evading the responsibility we have to our spirits and our souls. As the saying goes, you can run, but you cannot hide. No matter how much we try to bury ourselves or drown our sorrows in substance or distractions, we ultimately come face to face with our existence and the choices that we've made. Yes, we have choices, not always in those things that happen to us, but in certainly how we choose to respond. We can opt to fight for ourselves, refusing to be victims. We can succumb to despair and accept our circumstances and inevitable as inevitable. Even in the most unimaginable situations, there's a choice. A person who enjoys life-altering car accident, for example, still possesses the choice to adapt to a new reality with dignity and resilience. They can either wither, wallow, or self-pity, or rise to the challenge, finding strength within themselves in the connection to a higher power, propelling them towards a new life filled with limitless possibilities. That very much was where I was at. I was in that darkness. I knew I had to come out and face what was there before me. I knew that I had to discover who Sara was. And I had to kind of really look at the options that I had. And I tried to start something, that would hopefully grow. I tried to kind of reignite passion. I took courses, and that kind of came late 40s, early 50s. But the 40s was still very much immersed in my children and the teenage years. I had a lot of ups and downs with my children. You know, a few phone calls from various people about my son, come and get him. My daughter, all of a sudden, head spinning around, experimenting with things, and just like so hard. The problem was all of my children, I think, were feeling the repression that was going on at home. And here I was thinking, it's just me. As long as it's just me and the children are okay, I'm going to wait for the children to grow up before I separate. And I would even say to my husband, what do you see beyond the children? When the children leave home, he saw nothing. And I saw nothing because even when we went out for dinner, what did we talk about? There was really not much. We had so disconnected. If we were at a party or if we were anywhere, I've always been a person to get on with people, and he didn't like that because he liked to be the center of attention and he didn't like me getting attention. And so there was a lot of conflict, a lot of head thing, and a lot of what I call piranhaing, sucking the life out of me, a hell of a lot of arguments. And I know it was having effect on the children. And it was very, very hard. But I also was not earning because every time I ever got out there to try and earn, something would go wrong. And or it'd be children are suffering or this or that, or something would collapse. And so I can never get ahead into being independent financially. He did not give me an allowance. I had to ask for grocery food, for gas, for anything else. The clothes, kids need clothes. I kind of got my clothes at secondhand stores or places where I got it on discount. And I put that in with the grocery money and I made sure that everybody got fed decently. And that's where the clothing came up for me. Um, sometimes he'd be slightly generous and other times not. I can't remember. It was 93, so 97. So I was 47. No, I was 41. We had a house fire and we had renovated, and the renovation had been absolutely horrible. The people that we had employed to renovate and extend our house had run off with our money. And the thing is, we had employed him before. He had done 2 renovations for us, and we know who he is. We know his work, but he had changed, and he ran off with our money. And for 2 years, we're living in total disarray. We're sleeping in the kids' playroom. There's floors missing and this and that. And then finally we got an architect who ended up also screwing us over in a court case. Who just another story, but just if my husband hadn't been so cheap, we would have had people that were really qualified. But he was always trying to cut corners, and in the cutting the corners, we ended up with disaster. And so the house was in the final part of the renovation, and we had somebody painting for us, and the kids had a little shed thing underneath the deck, and then we just had double windows put in on one side of the house. And my daughter was sleeping with me, which often happened, and my husband was in her bed. And I always slept with the window open, always do. And when I wake up, when I hear something, I wake up and listen. What is it? Kid crying, something happening. What do I need? What do I need to do? This time I got up, jumped out of bed, looked out the window. And as I was looking out the window, flames were coming up. And I just managed to shut the window as the flames came up. They would have set fire to the curtains. The bed was less than a foot away. So shout fire, getting everyone out. My daughter, my oldest daughter and son were downstairs. We got my oldest daughter out, but she thought it was a dream and went back in because carbon dioxide was already affecting her. We had been to Disneyland for my daughter's 10th, and we'd seen Backdraft at Universal Studios, plus we'd seen the movie. And I'm trying to open up the shed door to see if we can let the flames out, and my son starts hosing me because he remembers Backdraft. Don't open it up. And my husband burnt his foot on the coals, and my daughter's on the front lawn, and the police come and they start blaming her. Were you smoking in bed? All of that. Shouldn't be talking to her without me anyway. But literally, my reaction saved us. Otherwise, the house would have gone right up. And from the front of the house, not much could happen, but the back of the house. And the interesting thing is that we had gone over to England in 97, and I had all these photographs. And in that one lower room, we had all the albums there, and I had all the pictures of the children and my mum's tapestry pictures. And I had said, please don't take the pictures. Please don't take the pictures. And the interesting thing is, when the fire was out and I was allowed back in, the guy said to me, I've never seen this. The extension, all the windows were black. We had a skylight, it was black. The windows in the kitchen were black. They were double glazed, all black from the fire. Part of the roof had gone because the flames all started up at the back. And all of the pictures of the children, the tapestries, the room that had been on fire, all the albums, everything was safe. He said, I have never seen this. There isn't one picture here that's turned black. They're all intact. And I said, well, I asked that the pictures be saved. Now, this led to the house being redone. My husband went into trauma. We were moved around from hotel to eventually a house that literally was falling to pieces. I'm in the bathtub one day and the whole glass on the mirror just collapsed. You could see where the drywall was up on the roof, on the ceiling, looked like it was about to come in. My daughter would not sleep in that room because she saw ghosts. It was a horrible room, a horrible house. We were there for a while they were rebuilding. My husband couldn't really cope with it, but when we saw the insurance people, oh God, the insurance man was so condescending. It's okay, little woman, leave it up to your husband. And my husband basically retreated. He would go into town. I don't know what he would do, but he's a realtor. He wasn't selling, wasn't doing anything. And I was every single day at the house. When they found out I was asthmatic, there was times they wouldn't let me in because they were chemicalizing the place. But I was there every day. I dealt with the insurance people of the rebuilding, the refurnishing, the recarpeting, the painting, everything for 2 months. Every day I was there. Take the kids to school, go to the house, go run around, whatever it is I had to pick up and do, pick the kids up, go home, back, same thing the next day. Then my mother was coming in December, and she came for 2 months. And I remember, New Year's Eve, we're back in our house, and we're back in the house beginning of December. And I remember New Year's Eve saying, what's your wish for the New Year? And I said, sleep, sleep. I hadn't slept in months. I was so exhausted. But what we did do is we had a party and kind of New Year's-ish, and we made it a 1970s party. And everybody came kind of geared up in 70s clothes. And I still had some 70s clothes. And so we were dressed up in that, and friends came with wigs and bandanas, the hippie period, and we had this fabulous party. And downstairs had been redone, and it was a nice area for kind of setting up a dance area. And basically the people before had done such a bad job. I had this beautiful teak cabinet, 200 years old, which I put plates in, and they had hung it up skew on two screws. That's it, just hanging on the screws. It was, and when they went round, they found 36 plugs on one socket. The house was ready to go up. They think that the paint ignited, or something with the electrical spark at the paint and set fire to it. My son got blamed. Did you have a candle? They had candles in the shed. It could have been slow burning and set fire to the place. They came out with saying, we really don't know if there's any one thing that started this fire. But the fact that all the electrical had been done so badly and been passed, right? And the plumbing, we learned that the plumber from the previous renovation had taken a certificate of somebody else's and put his name on it. He wasn't even a real plumber. One time we're having a toilet put in, so they had to hook up the toilets to the sewage. And we came home, a hole in the front yard, which is where they were doing things. The gas pipe was bent like this, ready to explode. and sewage everywhere in the bathroom downstairs and nowhere to be found or contacted, gone. And my son's brand new bike that he'd won at a tournament, gone. So, yes, I went through hell through that. It was very draining, very, very, very draining. But it's just another thing to get through. And I kind of realized that, my life was about getting the children out of messes or driving the kids to this function, that function, kids staying over, uh, you know, mom in the middle of the night, mom, um, there's a bunch of kids out here, they're young, their parents won't come and get them. Would you come and pick them up and take them home? I couldn't believe parents won't come and pick up 12 and 13 and 14-year-olds. And so I go get up and take them home. Or, mum, my friend is drunk. He's wobbling all over the place. Can you take him home? And then get shat on by the parents of who am I? Da 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 da. Blah, blah, blah. Kids coming, at the door, finding them at the door. The care parents have kicked them out and they come to stay with us and live with us for a while. All of this went on. And so I was kind of being pulled this way and that way, and, trying to find myself amongst the chaos of teenagers, a marriage going horrifically wrong, trying to feel I belong, trying to feel that, trying to find out who is Sarah, what am I meant to do, blah, 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 blah. That's how it felt. And that's where the loneliness came from, because I felt so kind of isolated. Everybody thought I had it together. And I was also getting sick. And in 97, I was diagnosed with the fibromyalgia, which think I had for at least a year beforehand, but finally the diagnosis came through. And, then that was another journey altogether because not much was known about fibromyalgia at that time. So it was very, very interesting and a very tumultuous time period. And, really what we're looking at is looking at a world that I was lost. I was lost and I couldn't find myself the turmoil that was going on. Um, Everything we did, nothing was ever good enough. Um, if we went away and I managed everything, of course, I booked, I packed, I organized, got everyone in the car and I drove. And if it wasn't right, then again, and then, he's the director, but he didn't step up. And so, yes, the fights were horrific. He would follow me from room to room to room until I would be in a corner, him sucking the life out of me. I'd just like you to push your hands together. Don't move them. Just push, 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 push without moving them until you build up a force. You might have to do it kind of a little closer, or you can do it farther, whatever the force is, and just push until you feel that pressure building up, that force building up. Imagine that pressure being put on you and just feeling it just sucking the life out of you. And so, yes, my health declined. I ended up with a ruptured cyst, and that was pretty horrific because then I ended up with a massive infection, and I just ended up with rosacea, and just like my whole body was breaking down, just because I just kind of couldn't do this anymore. So it was 2000. Had I turned 50 then? Sorry, my math isn't great. But it was at the end of the 40s. Yeah, I think I was 49. It was just before my 50th birthday. I asked my husband for a divorce. Now, in 95, a pendulum woman had removed past lifetimes from me and cleared me of those lifetimes. And it truly had been a revelation of me removing this brick wall that was always there that I never understood why I couldn't get through. And then that discovery of who is Sara now? What's been imposed of me from past lifetimes, and who am I now and what am I here to do? And that was the journey, that was the awakening. And then, kind of becoming ill and everything else. So when I asked my husband for the divorce, these are exact words: that bloody pendulum woman took the control I had over you away from me. And I said, hence the reason for the divorce. But still, he did not leave for 2 years. He had a girlfriend. He was out all the time, but did not leave. I gave him a room downstairs, mostly slept on the couch when he was there. And that's the 50s story. So the 40s was very tumultuous. It was a time that I was being very robotic, I was, as I said, volunteering. I was a volunteer for a kids group that was earlier. I was very proactive in my children's lives and taking them to things, etc., and then dealing with the teenage angst and doing that alone because I could tell him. Because if I told him, his retribution on the children was just horrible. My son broke his femur in that time, and we were meant to go to Disneyland then. We had to postpone it for 6 months. And that's why we went on my daughter's 10th birthday. But my son broke his femur. I can't remember if this is the 90s. I might be bleeding over on some time period there. Um, and I was in hospital with my son every day. I'd come home, shower, make food, make sure the kids were all looked after because they were the younger one or the older one. But they were at that age where they could either go to a friend's house, and as long as dad was there at night, um, they were okay. And I go back to the hospital to stay with my son. And, my husband actually said to him, choose, it's him or me. And I said, no brainer, it's him. How could you even ask that of a mother? And, brought my son home, and of course he's he's been operated on. He has a rod in there, he's in a wheelchair and needed a lot of looking after. And I remember, we went out to this fair that was going on. We had the wheelchair with us, but he decided he wanted to walk on the crutches. And my husband said, no, you get in the wheelchair, you get in the wheelchair. And he said, no, I want to walk on the crutches. I need some exercise. And he just pushed him against the car with his hand around his neck. And it's like, he did that a couple of times, to me or to them. And it's just, I mean, the funny thing is, my son's always been able to handle my dad so much better than anyone else. And, they've done a lot together since then. They all know who he is. My daughter with her 3 children, he doesn't spend much time with them. She's given him 3 grandsons. You would think, because he's Chinese, he would love that. But it's, I don't know, just in his own world. And doesn't make much effort. Never did, really. There were good times. There were good times. And those good times, there's always what I hung on to. And I thought, well, if we can have these good times, we can get back there. And then it was just like survival, survival, survival. What can you do to get through this? You're going to have to work where you can provide for yourself and the kids and all of that being suppressed and then the illness stepping in, and then children with all the things that they were going through and all the things that I went through with them, which I won't share here, but believe me, hair raising, which will go into the next decade as well. So it was a very lonely, discovering, revealing, and yeah, 95, that revealing of breaking through those walls and realizing that I'm not whatever I was carrying, and that discovery of wanting to know who I am. And I think that's kind of when the browbeating became even more intense, because he could see that I was stepping into myself. I was becoming my spirit again, and that's what he said he fell in love with, but that's what he was trying to suppress because he couldn't control that. And so that's where it became more intense. I understand when he said I lost the control over you is because I was now feeling and thinking and fending for self, and that's what he didn't have anymore. So, yes, a very roller coaster decade. But I got through it. And the 50s, once I asked for the divorce, I started doing the things to move forward. Not always the right things, but definitely a decade of change and movement. This was a decade of tumultuation, but the beginning of the start, the beginning of the self-discovery, the beginning of coming back into self, but then plagued by this illness, which now 30 years later, I still have. And yeah, you just weather through it. You do. You look at it, and I will say there were times that were really depressing, very darkness, like I went into myself. Um, if you look at photographs of me at that time period, I just looked like an old woman. I started wearing glasses all the time. Bifocals, hated them. I couldn't wear them. Had laser surgery later. And just everything about me looked old because I'm dealing with the illness. I'm dealing with feeling unloved and unwanted. I'm dealing with feeling lonely. I'm dealing with all that's going on the outside of me, the children, the, the fire, the this, the that, the everything. And it was just too much. And I aged quite considerably during that period, which he used against me later, which is in the next decade. So here I am, 71. It just shows you can get through them. Well, however rough a decade is, you can get through it. Where it was also the start of my self-discovery, it was also the real cosmic 2x4 with the illness of this. You can't take this anymore. If you continue this way, it's just going to kill you. And you have to end it. And so I had to find the courage, not knowing how I was going to support anyone, support myself. And it was my son that came to me when my daughter's sitting on the bed late at night and saying, like, he's not home? Nope. And he said, okay, Mom, it's time for a divorce. And I said, I'm waiting for Tasha to finish school. And she said, screw that. And they said, no, we'll manage. We'll get through this. It's time for divorce. And so it was my children. And my son had become the intermediate negotiator there. He would show his father a video of what he'd said, and he'd go, no, that's not me, because that's what a true narcissist is. They do not own what they say or do. So it was hard on the kids as well. And I was trying to be everything for them. And that was the decade I failed them, especially the last 5 years of that decade. And I definitely failed them at that time period because I had retreated into myself. I was depleted and I had given everything I could give, and I was giving everything I could give, but I had not much to give. Hence the reason for the illness breaking me down, autoimmune, immune system just broke down. And I just physically couldn't take it anymore. So I know that when my children were at their most volatile, young teenage years, I was struggling at the most. And I apologize to my children for that, for not being there the way they wanted me to be there. But I tried. I tried to do the best that I could. And a lot of, what they're going through today is because of that. But unfortunately, that's their journey to overcome as well. But I know at least one of them still harbors that whatever over it. And I can't do anything about it. It's done. It was, and it now is. And I'm sorry that I couldn't be there in the strength that they needed me to be there. They didn't have a father's strength. They did not share what was going on with their father. We would hide things from their father for fear of his reaction. I was carrying the load myself, and I wasn't carrying it very well. I couldn't ask for help because nobody believed I needed help, because I was the help. And so I was alone and feeling lonely. It was a rough decade. But the next decade is another chapter altogether. So until next time, folks, remember, I really, really, really encourage you to do your own decades, whether you share it or whether you share it with family or whether it's there on your demise for them to go and look at. Share your decades in writing, in video, in whatever way. Pour it out. This is your heart. This is your soul sharing. Leave it for them. Let them help them understand what you are, what you went through, what struggles you had, what triumphs you had. Share. And it's also a great way to revisit what we have gone through, how we found our courage, our strength, our abilities, and how we stepped into who we are today. That review is very, very good for you. So I encourage you to do the same. And if you do, let me know. Okay. So until next time, and the 50s, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. There are so many more for you to listen to right here on selfdiscoverywisdom.com. Come and hear the illumination that's going to shed light on your path.
Find your path with the knowledge of others.